Good evening, everybody. It is Bonney Lake's City Council workshop for the date of February 15th, 2020. Before we start, I do know that the governor did put in a new directive this past week. I think we will probably be past all of this probably before the end of the month. However, it is our duty to ask any staff member or any member of the public or anybody giving presentations who are present within the council chambers whether they do wish step out of the room for their own personal reasons or personal safety. And if not, we can begin. All right, Madam Clerk, could you call the roll, please? I'm here.
Deputy Mayor Carter.
Here.
Councilmember here. Councilmember Evans.
Here.
Councilmember Fullerton.
Here.
Councilmember McClellan.
Here.
Councilmember Swatman.
Present.
And Councilmember Watson.
Here. Okay. I believe we're going to start with a presentation from Paragon. I'll hand the floor over to Mr. Logan, Jeff Logan.
Jeff Logan, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Brianne Kelsey, one of my colleagues.
Oh, hello.
Good evening.
All right.
Are you guys safe?
Here you go.
Okay. All right. Good evening. Can you guys hear me okay? Yes. All right. Good evening, Mayor, council members, and staff here present today. On behalf of the owner applicants, Brianne Kelsey with Midtown Properties. We are super excited to be present here talking about Midtown with you this evening. This is a significant benefit and community offering with new housing choices, community space, and economic opportunity with the city. And also a new chapter for Bonney Lake to continue to grow in a positive manner. Speaking alongside me today, there is a project team present, but we have a few key members that I would like to briefly introduce. One of them being to my right is our market expert, Kimberly Byron, who's with Zonda, who will speak a little bit about the multifamily market today. We also have Jeff Lovshin, our teammate with Midtown Properties, who's going to walk you through a little bit of the vision and the master plan. And then alongside, in terms of some planning detail, our architect, Derek Wilkinson, with the city and the community, will also set us talk about housing variety, thank you, types and neighborhoods within the community. And we'll finally wrap up with a little bit about community benefits and a snapshot on. I propose that we would keep this as a open dialogue throughout the presentation, and we'll make every effort and attempt to pause and take a moment as we get through each section and each chapter of the material so that we have some interactive dynamic conversation. You have an opportunity to ask questions along the way. Many of you are familiar with Tarragon. I think a few of you may not be, so I think it's helpful for us to give a little brief overview of us as a team and of the group in front of you. We are the representative owner, developer, and builder for the Midtown residential site, which is approximately 75 gross acres, located obviously in Bonney Lake in the Midtown Centers area. This is a culmination of well over 5 years of hard work with our involvement that is well beyond the fact that we just celebrated a year of having acquired the property in February of 2021. Project is currently under development and pre-construction stage. As submitted, there are a few applications that are currently under review with staff. While we go through our conversation today in concept and planning, I would like you to keep in mind that this plan is largely conceptual. It is a multi-phase project, and we have lots of work in front of us, lots of refinement and working through some of the specifics. Flexibility and adaptability are key concepts to keep in mind as well, which allows us to work through and navigate changing market conditions, multi-phase project. And quite frankly, we don't have everything absolutely figured out just yet. The scale must provide for a degree of flexibility as we move forward. We do know that what is important for the site is we are anticipating a site work starts commencing this year, with the vertical timeline commencing the following year in 2023. Here's a brief snapshot for you of the project team. Many of them are here and present today. As mentioned, Bonney and Bonney, architect, will be speaking. Our market study expert, Zonda, will be speaking. But you can see a lot of the presence and the expertise of the groups represented here. Some are local firms, some are regional firms, but they've all helped us design and build to the best extent what you have. So who is Terragon? While we've been operating for well over 25 years, it is our history which is most important, but we are also super excited about the future. Industrial, residential, and commercial projects have quite an extensive experience across the Puget Sound. We also have a current active pipeline of many projects in Pierce County, Thurston County, Kitsap counties, in addition to. With a staff and a team that's based both in Seattle and Sumner, we're actually one of very few companies that both develops and builds. We self-perform all of our garden court multifamily communities, our intent for the Midtown site. We also create more than buildings. We actually find really cool places for people to connect. They come together by energizing our properties, no matter the asset class, with lots of amenities. We contribute and invest long-term in the communities we build in. We have long-standing relationships, partnerships, and a legacy to carry on with many communities and cities. At the core of each of our projects is quality and impact. We focus a lot of time and attention on our project, and we feel it is super important to get it right out front. Key to some of these images that you see before you right now, which is indicative of where we're building, especially within the last year, with projects like Glacier Run, Kent Station, Seaport, and many others that we probably couldn't quite fit on one single slide of our impact right now. But we bring life to our communities to develop and build within. As mentioned, we also create and connect places for people to work, to shop, to live, and even to play. In the last 5 years, we completed well over 22 projects. Add to that a year of accomplishment, a pivotal year with the pandemic, and we safely broke ground on apartments, townhomes, industrial buildings, retail sites, and even commenced on the first phase of a master plan community. We also completed several projects that were already underway and teed up for delivery. Finished the final phase of Glacier Run, which is the residential project, in addition to another project called Square Trail. In the industrial market, you see in one of these images here, Seaport is a great example of a 20-year investment for us, where we just can't actually build it fast enough. So our focus, as you can see from this, is a sense of place and the experience within. Go after impact with everything we do. And at the heart of this is our vision, integral and key to Midtown and key to the team that's working on this, is that we build opportunity and cultivate community in everything we do. At the heart of this as well is our 3 core values: expertise, integrity, and stewardship. And our team is our biggest asset. Our people define our culture, our approach, and our diversity success that is evident in the market. For Midtown, we bring life into the community by providing much needed diversity in housing. And we will continue to engage all 3 of these core values as a theme through every step of the process: planning, design, development, construction, and through to occupancy. With that, I would like to take a pause for a moment if anybody has any comments or questions before we move on to the next.
Do you have any member of the council have a question? I have a question. When you say diversity in housing, can you specify what as to what? You're
jumping ahead of part of our presentation, so I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, but you're going to see
Oh, I don't have.
No worries. No worries.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I have a question.
Yes. And I'm sorry, I can't see who is speaking on my screen, so.
This is Councilman McClymans. I would ask that the definition of stewardship.
Definition of stewardship is what is the definition? Is that the question? That is us paying attention to what land use is and the authentic value of a piece of property and making sure that our sense of place pays homage to that.
I heard most of that. And making sure of what? Your sense of what?
Creating sense of place for every property that we develop and build, and honoring the site and its specifics so that we are the steward of the land in the proposed development that comes forward.
Okay, and would that include the recognition that in the last 10 years, the preponderance of people who moved here moved to single-family homes as opposed to large, high-density multifamily dwellings?
We can expand on that thought, which might be a great opportunity for us to into a little bit of multifamily and market access. Kimberly, you ready?
Yes, sure. I apologize. I've got to take this off. I feel like I've cotton in my mouth. So glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me. A little bit of my background: I'm an economist by training. I have been studying housing markets throughout the United States, Mexico, and Canada since 1991. So happy to be here. I can talk about this all day long, so please call me later, because I will not keep you here all night. So as part of the team, one of the things that I bring to the table is not just a giant book report that everyone doesn't read. I come in and try to help answer difficult questions and, confront data. And so there's not a slide with the sources in this presentation, but there is a bibliography for those who want to go check my work that Jeff can provide you. And just so you know too, a lot of the data that I did pull is something that can simply be compared to, Google. I didn't want any of this to be something that was a report that no one can ever access. So some of these comparisons are very simply data that are apples to apples. So just wanted to kind of provide some of the answers that the team was asking up front and kind of give you the answers and then dig into some of the data quickly. So first and foremost, I think that this has already come up, is rental housing. And what we're proposing and what we think is a great opportunity with rental housing, and part of that is higher density, but a lot of that is also on the lower side, as you'll see later. provides an option for starter households. And you're absolutely right. I'll show you that data that most of the people that have moved here, certainly in the younger groups, have had to occupy occupied housing because there's just not rental housing available. So that's a very true statement. But we believe that in order to provide a feeder population for our households that will be converting and moving, just the overall transition of housing, the housing cycle, that it's a benefit to have some rental housing available for the starter households, as well as some of the older households that are in transition. And I'll show you a little bit about that. We talked about, and the word diversity comes up, more diversity in the housing stock can also enhance the business activity and employment, and I'll show you just some simple comparisons on business summaries. Everybody's always worried about traffic, and so I did want to provide you some recent renter vehicles versus owner vehicles in specific community as well as the U.S. and some other comparisons. And then finally, what everyone is always worried about, and that is, will apartments or rental housing impact the value of my house or the value of my house improving over time? And so I'll share some statistics based on that as well. So first of all, baseline, and I know you guys already know this, the current housing stock in Bonney Lake is at 20%. Well, is that good or bad? Well, who knows? But I just want to give you some measurements of other percentages, and this is tenure by units and structure, renter occupied, and that comes from that data source. So the U.S. sits at about 36% renter occupied housing. Obviously, that includes large major metro areas. Phoenix has over 50% in their actual city of Phoenix, so that's a pretty high bar. So what I did is I actually went out and found the list of the best suburban communities or bedroom communities in the United States. And I picked out 18 of the top 50 who have similar population sizes as Bonney Lake, just as a metric, so how do we measure up? And those communities, and that was, things like good schools, crime's low, all of those nerd wallet type measurements, come together, and if you look at their percentage of renter occupied housing, it's at 29%. So moving that needle a little bit on us, that may not, taking that all the way down, may not impact some of those metrics that just nationally we're looking for as a good bedroom. The demographics, and again, I think most of you have seen many of these charts before. This is actually produced by ASRI, and it is population changes, and I actually grouped them by generation. And so I've got a couple of subgroups that you may not be familiar with, but obviously Gen Z, which I have a 14-year-old at home that I want to kill, and that's her age group. And then millennials, but I also kind of break out younger millennials and millennials into that exennial, which is on the older side. And then, of course, you have a Gen X, which is what I am. Then you have the younger boomers, the older boomers, and the greatest. As you already know, in your community, you have kind of a barbell of change that you're staring at right now. You have younger households that are coming into the community, and then you have growth, a lot of growth in the older households. And I actually just also provided that comparison with the bedroom communities as well, so you can see where you, while, we definitely have a much stronger growth potential in some of the older communities, and again, you already know this, as well as the younger community. Another important note, which was already brought up, if you look at those Gen Z and millennial populations, they do in fact occupy a higher percentage of owner-occupied housing in Bonney Lake as compared to the overall, those bedroom communities. That's the chicken and the egg. They don't have a rental housing unit to live in, therefore if they're coming here, they're probably living in an owner-occupied. On the reverse side of that, which I found most interesting, is it does seem that the older population, the boomers and the greatest generation, are occupying at the same rate as just that 29, the bedroom communities. So I found it interesting that the older population definitely has embraced more of the renter-occupied. Again, that's the next 5 years coming up. So what we believe, and again, this is our support for our community, is that the Gen Z and millennial households that are renter become great feeders into our owner-occupied housing, and in particular as the movement and transition of the greatest generation moves out of homeownership and continues to embrace renter because they have been embracing it. We think that's a great segue for that next group of people that are currently renting. You also see a very large boomer owner-occupied housing. If they want to stay in the community and sell their home and transition, they really don't have anywhere to go either. That's a really big cut right there that potentially might be interested in rental housing in the future. Switching gears a little bit, I want to talk about traffic. Everybody cares about that. Again, some nice comparisons here. U.S., this is actually number of vehicles owned by household for renters only. And at the U.S. level, owner occupied is the blue bar. The average number of vehicles per household is 2.1 versus the renters, which is 1.3. Again, lots of metros, lots of walkability, et cetera, in that, baked in that number. So how does Bonney Lake compare to Pierce County overall? Overall, Pierce County shows 2.3 vehicles per owner-occupied home versus 1.5 for renters. And then again, that benchmark of bedroom communities has some of the lower vehicle ownership, I suspect because they're really trying to push more pedestrian-friendly environments and mixed use and things like that. So 1.9 owner-occupied units, vehicles per household versus 1.5. We currently sit at a pretty high number in Bonney Lake, 2.5 owner-occupied or vehicles per owner-occupied unit, and 1.5 or 1.5, I believe, no, 1.9 for renters. I also wanted to point out for those that read through traffic studies and care about that, they use a manual that's the trip generation manual. The 10th edition actually says that a single family household pursues more trips per unit than a suburban mid-rise apartment deal. So on average, about 44% less traffic generated from a suburban mid-rise apartment deal than from an owner-occupied home. So switching gears, oh wait a minute, I want to switch, I want to end with this. Talk a little bit about the businesses here. This was actually really fascinating to me. And again, data junkie. So lots of information on this slide. So again, comparing Bonney Lake to that U.S. composite that I created of the 18 bedrooms. What I found was that same average, population, you can see our resident population, that data source 951, the 18 communities is 21,573. So very similar population size. Many more business establishments with that mix. Again, causation could be not suggesting there's a correlation, but definitely a very fascinating statistic that you see that there are more businesses in these communities. So it does seem to me that the population housing stock with more diversity could support more businesses. I'm not just saying retail, I'm saying everything. And that's what that chart is intended to show you. That actually takes every super sector. So other than transportation and warehousing, in which we actually outperform or have more businesses than that composite, every other industry we're at a deficit of some sort, some of them very small. But most importantly to me as an economist are the higher paying sectors such as fire, information management. We are at a 50% or higher deficit in number of businesses in those sectors. So again, not saying there's a strong, correlation, but definitely from a standpoint of businesses seems to be that could be supported better with more rental housing. Unemployment rate in Bonney Lake currently, again, just Googling that, 6.8 compared to these composites at 4.5. We're at the end of this pandemic, everybody's trying to get back to work, and a lot of that's geographic and regional differences. Openings, we just want to share that statistic as well. Lots of data. So if anybody wants to call me or we can talk about this afterwards, I'm happy to drill down further. You're like, is she stopping yet? Last point that I wanted to share, and this is probably the most important one. There's a lot of national data about housing prices and renters, the Urban Land Institute, and a lot of studies, Harvard Business, it's all over the place. But I actually simply pulled together some facts on our geographic regions by zip code, and I'm going to point something out. I know there have been units built in Bonney Lake, but that number that I'm showing is multifamily institutions that have been delivered. So over 100 units doesn't include affordable housing, senior housing, or student housing. So Redmond being a very active multifamily zip code, as you're probably aware, 4,300 units delivered over the last 5 years in that community. Has a very high home price already. So it doesn't usually increase at the double digit level when you're at that higher price. It's still an average house appreciation of 7% a year. And drilling down into some of the smaller zip codes, Everett, just picking one, 98201 had 405 units delivered over the last 5 years. Again, this is just Redfin data, so you can pull this up and check my work. $505,000 house price, 18% price appreciation. Us, again, no institutional units built. Know that there have been some affordable housing units built, but of course here also again Redfin based 10%. So just some statistics there. Last slide, and I will open it up, is we actually performed 4 or 5 of these different case studies for Terragon when we were going through this process and trying to understand, making sure that, we weren't, making the data say something that it wasn't. And we picked Glacier Run because that is one of their communities. So, in looking within a 1 mile radius, the methodology was home prices in a 1 mile radius, how are they rising? And then the gray bar you can see is when Glacier Run was delivered. And you can see that home prices continue to increase and actually increase at a faster rate than the overall community. So just another, again, I've got 5 different examples of this, and I'd be glad to bore you with those if you want to take a look at them as well. Anyway, that's all I have. And again, presented this information to the teams so that they could incorporate some of this thinking into, specifically as it relates to the demographics and things, some of the different housing types that we might propose. Yes, sir.
So how, just sitting here about the Holly, how does this Holly,
Okay.
do you work Holly?
Yes, I can pull any data you'd like.
So how does this compare, you built this Holly, it's wonderful every year. Now, is there a possibility people going to Holly would like to move into this development you're doing here? Is that apples for apples or not? Because these multi-family homes, and those are single family.
Just when I look at the housing here, I feel like, and it's this way in a lot of communities, is that you want younger families to move into homes. But they're frozen because we just need this cycle to begin to move more. And that's where when you need more housing, you need all kinds, right? And so it's just, whether they come, wherever they come, is important to unfreeze some of the housing. So, I can specifically go and do some research on your question in particular, try to provide it to Jeff so that it gets you more familiar.
Who are you drawing, you like to have read the speed there?
Well, we would draw from everywhere. If you look at the commuter maps currently, and you know this because you live here, working in this price. So you'd like for some more people to work in the community, and over time, hopefully, you have more businesses, and they're not just retail businesses, but other types of businesses. But really, you want to draw from everywhere you can, where people can afford it and have a diverse housing. That's your question. We can talk on that.
Yeah, kind of.
Anything else?
One thing you didn't show was the median income of those 18 Bonney Lake. Do you have?
Oh, I got it. It's the same also. I have it. I can answer that.
Okay.
I wouldn't have included, I was looking for things that were similar to us. But I will tell you, and again, it's on the source data, the communities range from Jericho, New York, Short Pump, Virginia, Homewood, Alabama, Cinco Ranch, Texas. They're suburban communities, Baldwin, Missouri, so different places.
And what about the rental costs in those cities? Bonney Lake.
The rental
Costs?
they can be all over the place. That is a good question. Yeah, I have it in my spreadsheet. I don't want to get too detailed.
Anything else?
Yes, I did have a question.
Yes.
So are you trying to draw like some kind of correlation between a multifamily development and single family prices?
No, what I'm trying to share in this particular For instance, the question is when multifamily is built in this particular, multifamily is built in your area, what happened? And so we drew that 1 mile radius and said, what changed? You know, the only thing that changed, you know, lots of things changed, but apartments were built there, right, during that gray time period. And what happened to home? So they did go down, right? And that's what everybody kind of like thinks. There's a whole bunch of reasons why they could go down, but they did not go down. And really that kind of goes back to that whole, that water level, you know, theory that, you know, when something positive happens, more positive things continue to happen, and the momentum, people, you know, when one real estate opportunity exists, more exists. It's just.
Yeah, because it's kind of that particular development is rather undeveloped area also. So are you the person telling them they can't, you know, build what they want to build the current size that, or is there a financial analysis saying that their project won't work unless they increase the density?
Now, what my role is to say, here's what the market needs, this size.
You more accurately, probably not what the market needs, but what the market could.
Fair, what is fair, same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, what the
It's very
market.
different, because the need is something you should do, and they could, is, right? You know, from our perspective, we're trying to figure out what the value is in the development right now.
Yes, and when we analyze unit, you know, we're looking at what are the best unit types for people, for housing, for where things will be successful from a market.
Yes.
Do you have any stats on like crime with rentals versus single family housing or apartment buildings?
Crime?
Yeah, crime rates.
Now, we can pull that from ESRI, but that's probably not as good as the police department giving you like every like call that they get. And every municipality is different, you know, so it would be hard, like I said, you can use those crime indexes. I'd be happy to do that. The last time I did do that, interestingly, was in Oxford, Mississippi for a student housing project. And there was a concern about students and calls. And when I did get the data from the city, what I found, which was actually shocking to me, was that they had more calls at the hospital. So there were not as many, you know, calls. So that was the last time that I actually analyzed it call by call by call. The crime indexes are available.
I would just be interested in that. I've worked with apartments of some sort, and it seems like we have all apartment. They're building and people around them purchases a house. Obviously, that's just kind of a
Yes,
big.
yeah, more people on it.
Yeah, everybody.
Yeah, that's a good observation. I would also probably put in that same spreadsheet that rent level and the number of bedrooms as well, just to kind of see.
Just real quick, I want to tag on that. We have apartments in East Town. The calls for our police have dropped dramatically, people out there in apartments. That's my concern too, because our police councilman are talking about stuff. So is that, have you consider that?
Well, that one isn't affordable housing, right? I can't comment specifically on that one, but I can tell you that, you know, obviously when you're a qualificational owner, you would qualify people based on, you would not accept anybody that had a crime, that's certain, you know, in your criteria. You would also want to accept people with higher income to, or higher credit ratios. And I have found that credit ratios are actually a really good predictor.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, well, it's part of the, typically it's part of the operations process whenever someone comes in.
And I'm meaning that our,
Excuse me.
Yes, Councilman.
Yeah, do you have any data on the impact to public schools, such as graduation rate, the burden for extra services like free lunches or additional teaching staff that's going to be required?
And I don't know if you guys have done a school study. We do them. I have not done one for this particular asset, but typically bills are rather low for children. 0.25 per unit. And again, that's driven primarily by the unit mix. I say this as a joke, but in many instances, dogs and children.
That's all in White River, isn't it, Jeff, or you know? Probably in White River.
The district is split, so we're in two, we're both in Summer Bonney Lake. They're two separate parcels, but the entire site is split.
So we'll report back with more data.
Do you already know that they're gonna have some kind of an agreement with that? Because it's become very problematic for school transportation and budget. I know the White River District kind of juts into the city of Bonney, if you will, there. And there's been some agreements between some housing, areas there where even though they're physically located in the White River District, they have agreement that they'll go somewhere or something. There's,
Yeah, they can wait for the holidays.
I don't know if they already figured that out, because there's a school district thing is like a huge issue for people a lot of times. They need it.
Yeah, we are aware of obviously the two different school districts. There's a conversation or part of the process that we will haven't identified specific any action taken or any decisions with either. Or anything.
Well, there would have to be kind of a sidebar. It's not like changing the boundary, it's more like agreement with the school district, right? Hopefully, the rest of the council will use that as a point too, if they choose to go forward, because I would hate for that to be something that we wait until we've approved your agreement and say, oh, by the way, you guys are like, yeah, we're gonna figure that out, yeah, whatever, okay.
Well, I think
Right.
we'd like to have.
Yes. But it's an easy thing, right? It's either a yes or no. It's kind of very binary. Yeah, okay, they're agreed to check here.
Sorry, excuse me.
Any kind of a boundary swap or any kind of an agreement there, that's one of those things where what I'm hearing from you, Jeff, is that you guys haven't had that some kind of a high level kind of thing. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, we'll get that done. Well, it's come down to the 11th hour, and you're asking us to increase our density, and there's all these issues going on. But you heard my
Understood, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. And the school district issue, so to speak, is something that we are considering to explore. But I think to also echo Kimberly's comment, if you look at our communities, there often are more dogs than children. So there's not necessarily a direct comparison that is obviously on school enrollment for either of these districts. But again, we will continue to have that conversation.
Well, and one of the things that I'm a bit concerned about is talking about the different communities that you kind of bring in this median data to us as far as what we're using to develop our community here. And you mentioned different properties that you've been working with. One of them came up as being Cinco Ranch, Texas. And Cinco Ranch, I know fairly well. And I know that it couldn't be anything more different than what we have here. Cinco Ranch is developed on flat, salt plain, no mountains, in an area to where you can you can build up the traffic, put in more laneage, you can basically spread it out in a way that we cannot spread out here. So what I'm more concerned about is instead of taking it as a flat demographic all over to where you have such diverse communities, having studies that show um, uh, demographics and that compare more to our area here, which is we're limited on a lot of things, such as traffic. We're built on a hill, that goes down to where we cannot spread out like some of these communities. And so I'm wondering if you had any data that might, or you may be able to put more into that would address our needs a little better.
We can definitely, what comes to my mind is maybe take those, again, I was just trying to not leave the witness at all, just say, hey, here's a list of, the only thing that, there's
Well, we're not in a courtroom, you can leave
Yeah.
it. Sorry.
But maybe we look at ones that haven't grown much, so kind of. So, there's a lot of different ways. Definitely, I'm happy. Get comfortable. Again, it's just a matter. No one's saying anything's good or bad. It's just, hey, here's a metric that was, just randomly selected based on, the same criteria that would be positive.
Oh, well, no, and I understand. I'm just trying to look in the future. Our traffic is become quite a problem that we put in. One of the issues we're going to have to deal with the multi, which is going to in those 62 to 75 acres is going to increase our traffic problems even more. And so I was wondering how you get to, and I'm just using traffic, as an example, but what I'm wanting is our Bonney Lake's unique issues and how deep you've gone into actually study that way rather than.
Yes. Well, and what comes to my mind too is the work from home aspect that has changed somewhat, and being able to provide specifically. A lot of my clients are very concerned about providing the spaces for people that would be working from home, which would be a great benefit to.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah, so I think that's in the design, and I think that there's some really interesting steps out there that we're seeing, and we'll continue to be talking about that and plan for that. 1-bedroom dens, they have natural light coming in are always really good options for renters that are working from home. And so anyway, we're way in the weeds.
Oh, thank you.
I've got one more.
Yeah.
Some of these facts just off of Google, which they would get them. I'm more of this American talk about things the body of everything. You talk about one car household. In our area here, we are quite a industrial based area. They go to Sumner. Majority of our people that live here work in Sumner. Those people drive there. They don't have any transportation other than vehicles to get down the hill, except for our parking lot. But then they have more vehicles to our roads. Most of these homes might have 2 people in them. And they might all be driving to our east town area or down to Sumner or other areas for manufacturing and stuff. So what are you taking into account to make sure those amount of people back within our tax and Bonney Lake? Could you studying done to the fact that people will be living here and how much more they add to our traffic base and doing it?
Well, I know that they performed a traffic study, and so you can analyze that. But just generally speaking, like what comes to my mind too is, there's mixed use environments that are very in this all over the country, urban areas that provide walkability. Certainly, maybe not to work, but to entertainment and other things. And I think that's what the plan is that they're going to talk about later is the connectivity to some of those aspects to keep the cars off the road, to keep fewer people with fewer cars on the road. And again, also benefiting from the work from home and providing that opportunity and the design for it. So those are just some of the ideas, but I know there's a traffic study.
Thank you.
Thank you for the great questions, and I think that a lot of them will actually we're going to, as we continue into the vision, we're going to do specifically the project and the vision down here, which hopefully will answer questions. But again, we are planning for in order to try and reduce trips through increased walkability, especially through the project. So Before we dive in specifically, I think we, again, just kind of wanted to highlight that this project is, fully within the Midtown Centers plan, which was adopted by the city 5 years ago. Again, as we were undertaking the development and planning of what we were proposing to build here, we obviously looked at a number of different sources, performed a bunch of different analysis, but for this, we also looked at plans adopted. And I think one of the things that we tried to embrace here with what was in the center's plan is two main components that was indicated in that plan. And one is, again, supporting having new residential opportunities within walking and biking distance. So Midtown is really a commercial center. There's a lot of retail there along 410. And so providing new residential units, especially ones that are oriented in a way that promotes walkability, will reduce those automobile trips for people, even just making them to those retail or commercial businesses. And then I think also, again, around the community, like within the community and around the community, promoting safe walking and biking opportunities was something that was indicated in that plan and something that we definitely have tried to embrace. So, I think, in terms of moving towards a vision for Midtown, it's one of the things that Brian mentioned. We're a long-term holder. And so one of the things that we do with every project that we look at is really trying to identify what is the best fit for that one. That's stewardship. How do we identify what's going to have the most positive impact on the communities that we build in? And so one of the ways of doing that is developing a set of guiding principles to really help us, keep that path as we're going through all the various machinations of every project. Is how are we going to, achieve the goal that we set out? And so I think in terms of evaluating Bonney Lake and knowing the community and some of the things that you have expressed here at council, things that we've heard by talking to people in the community, is really these sort of 5 core guiding principles. You can see them up here on the screen. I won't, go line by line on each of them, but I think to call out 2 that are particularly important. One is honoring the spirit of Bonney Lake. There's a lot of pride in us. Really feel that, and I think that's a great thing to leverage. Like Councilmember Baldwin, even a few weeks ago, when she was preparing to be appointed, mentioned that Bonney Lake was a town. It's not a city, it's a town. It's a community that you really feel, and so that's something that we're trying to create a community where people know their neighbors, where they can, be integral and be a part of the Bonney Lake community. This is definitely something that we're. And then I think the other thing too that's important to highlight here is that we're really looking to unlock health and recreation. So we talk about walking and biking. That's moving around, but part of that is also being able to provide opportunities for people to recreation, either through the on-site, fitness centers that we'll be building, or the 2 miles of walking trails and paths that are going to be part of this community. And then even more importantly, the adjacency to the future Midtown Park and how we can connect our community to that park, then also allow for other residents that are in Bonney Lake to move through our community, for example, just east of 214, to be able to access the park and move through our community to get there, whether or not they are just walking to go to the park or they want to go on a run or do something.
Which brings up a good question that you were talking about. Just mentioning fitness centers. Normally or traditionally, what I've been used to with that is that fitness centers like that are usually only available to that you built, and you're talking about bringing the entire community, talking about that as these fitness centers, our entire populace.
I think that the exact amenities sort of within the community have yet to be determined, but there will be a mix of sort of private only, tenant only facilities, and then some that will also be.
How about hiking and running trip?
Yes.
Okay.
So, one of the things is there's as part of the existing agreement in place, there's a buffer, a buffer trail that goes through the majority of the site. So that would be part of something that would be publicly accessible, but also, ways to access, to traverse through the site and get to the permit. Like that is overall. So, before we move on into specific plan details, we have a short video that we would like to share with council. So that was meant, obviously, to give you just a quick taste and vibe of kind of what we're proposing project, being some of the mixed housing types units that we will be that we're proposing to bring.
And I'm sorry,
Yes,
to
of course.
but I saw terms in there like flats and longs. And traditionally flats, if you take Bridgeford, you're actually buying those. Are they intended to be rented or are they intended to be bought?
The entire community is envisioned.
Okay.
And in a few minutes, actually, Garrett Wilkinson here from our architecture firm is going to speak in a minute and give a little bit of detail on kind of what some of those product types and building types look like. But yes, the community is all being present. But again, I think in terms of moving into some of the details on the site plan, the master plan, we spent really over an entire year really with all of our consultants analyzing many different components from these folks on site, where's the best access points, where are areas that we can preserve trees or some of the existing landscaping, and other factors to really, again, create the best community and the best design. Overall, the plan is envisioned between 1,000 to 1,100 units over multiple phases. That's looking at anticipating a 10-year time frame. The first phase, though, is really 250 units. That's what we would be doing, which is loosely shown as kind of this conceptual master plan. That first phase was the kind of the peak behind the curtain, so to speak, behind that for that development. But it'll have to include a mixed building types, the lofts, flats, cottages, townhomes. But again, on a sort of to be determined based upon market absorption, based upon what's working with community where best that they fit. But overall, this is going to be a $250 million investment. So a large investment that we're really excited to start on and work with it. So I would like to bring up Garrett to talk a little bit more about the project, but again, I think some of the things that we're going to talk about here are, again, circulation, access, the development of multiple neighborhoods on the site. And again, I think reinforcing capabilities because, again, we only know what we know, and we want to have the flexibility. We need to have the flexibility to determine what fits within this community as we build out the project.
So we got 800 right now, right? Is that what it is? So the agreement now is 800?
There's no set number within.
But it's set density, so you know what you can build in a big scheme.
There's ranges within the development.
But what I'm trying to figure out is why you're so far off. You guys do a great job. Thank you for the tours, by the way. It's very nice to actually see somebody. But I'm still lost on why there's much of a conversation, because you have an agreement that you can work in. Great. Welcome. Have at it.
Well, we believe that what we are proposing in terms of density and the unit count is within of the development agreement, and frankly,
So this is just there's going to be nothing for us. There's going to be no future agreement. We're good. We're golden. I got dinner to go to.
well, I think we look forward. We're here to do a presentation. We're really excited to speak with you about what we're valuing. And we look forward to having those conversations with council and staff as part of our continued development.
Right, again, but I don't, if you have an agreement, you have an agreement. That's what I'm, right, that's my function as a council member is to keep you.
Well, yes, we have the agreement in place now, but we're here with, in front of you today because of the impact that the project community, and we look forward to, again, working with this part of. We, as Brianna and others have mentioned, we are long-term holders. We stay in the community. We rarely sell any projects, and we stay in those communities for the long term. So we invest a lot of time in that.
Again, you have an agreement though, so there's no changes necessary. It's just an informational position.
Well, again, I think there are a number of conversations part of our future entitlement process with patients that we look forward to having in greater detail with both councils. Council member, I would like to introduce Gary Wilkinson of the Bonney and Bonney to walk through the master plan here.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Garrett Wilkinson. I work with the City of Bonney Architects. We've been in business for over 45 years. We're primarily a residential architect. We primarily domestically, although we've done large and small projects all over the world. I wear two hats at the firm in that I'm an architect and a planner. So this was this master plan our team worked on with Aragon for the last few months, and so I'd like to walk you through it. So I know you guys are familiar with the site, but let's just walk through it. We have on the north edge the commercial along 410. On the east and on the south, we have the existing residential primarily. And then to the west, we have the future Midtown Park. Project project itself is broken into a series of neighborhood units, and each of those is further divided into smaller sort of sub-neighborhoods. What we're showing here is a neighborhood that has sort of 3 sub-areas in it, and each of these neighborhoods has 2 or 3 sub-areas in it. The overall framework of the site is this network of pedestrian circulation spaces. So as was mentioned earlier, there's a perimeter trail that runs around the northeast and south sides. There are trails running through the site that would connect directly to the park to the west. There's the opportunity to access the commercial to the north from the trail network, as well as each neighborhood has pedestrian connectivity running through it as well. So it breaks down the land use into smaller pieces with a lot of pedestrian choice. So, you know, if I live here and go walk my dog, I can take a different route every day and not repeat. The vehicular network, we have 3 primary entries. We have one here on the south, off of Prairie, and then 2 off of 114th. And then what these do is they lead in to a pair of larger community amenities, one in the north and one in the south. And then from a vehicular point of view is once you get past it, and we'll see it in more detail on the next slide, we start to gate these elements. So all of these sub-neighborhood areas would be behind a pair of master gates. And then on these other neighborhoods that are fronting the internal streets, we have smaller gates to access those. So, you know, overall, the site might have 7 or 8 different gates. And these sub-neighborhoods can connect to one another as well, again, to ease circulation for the residents and guests. One of the sort of grand moves within this master plan is, in addition to having the pedestrian network throughout, we wanted to try to center the plan and come up with a gesture that really starts to give you a sense of where you're at when you're in the master plan. And so you know, some of these trails, you might not know exactly where you are. They might start to be indistinguishable from one another. And so what we started to do is connecting the 2 amenities with this sort of large sort of crescent combination of road and pedestrian space and open space to really give you a sense of when you're in the community, you're like, okay, when I see this, I know exactly where I am. Similarly, this east-west connector through the site, you know, we wanted to take advantage of the grade so that when you're on the high ground over here, you can see across the entire site. You know where you're at. You know, that sort of identifiability for the residents and guests, we think is very important. Move to the next slide. So, zooming in on this first neighborhood, what you can see is it's centered around the south amenity. We have road connections coming in. We have gated element here to gate these 2 areas. This element is gated here. We have a basin and water feature that's with the amenity here. As you can see, the amenity, the collection of buildings, pool, fitness, like that, parking. And then inside of each neighborhood is another minor amenity, you know, whether it be a basketball court or a picnic area or top lot or park, all those types of things can be found in each neighborhood. Another thing that we're doing is as you get to the southern part of the site where you're up against more of a single family neighborhood across the street, we also start to break down the buildings. We start to use smaller buildings. In the future phases, we're discussing using more of the cottage prototype down here in this part of the site, whereas flats may be more prevalent in the northern half of the site. So we're trying to be sensitive to our adjacencies, as well as make the whole the overall experience of the place be cohesive. There could be a variety of architectural styles. That's a good segue. Let's start talking about architecture. Proposed building types. We worked with Terragon to identify 4 general subtypes of residential housing product that was appropriate to the site, that fit within the types of projects that they typically build, and also present opportunities and flexibility moving forward for new product types as market evolves. Starting with lofts. Lofts are typically, and this is the main Sumner, 2 to 3 stories in height, have a pedestrian emphasis. The open space is taken with courtyards and patios and balconies. Lofts, they start to be a little differentiated from flats in that they can have higher ceilings, they can have more of a front door onto a pedestrian space type of character. And again, with each of these types, they can start to blend together a little bit. They're not hard and fast rules. Shifting to flats. Flats in general, typically 3 stories, and can have a variety of configurations. This, for example, starts to have ground level single-story massing that then steps back to a higher 3-story building to, again, kind of break the scale down to make it more pedestrian friendly. Even with, this apartment here, for example, or flat, sorry, is something along the lines of 700 square feet. But we're able to really, by articulating the building, come up with long diagonals and a lot of light on multiple sides of the buildings. And so that, again, that's one of our firm's strengths, is to be able to innovate in terms of the actual units themselves and really make them very livable. Another flat that probably familiar with here is Glacier Run over at South Hill. This again, starts to illustrate the types of amenities we're going to be using with this, the type of massing for a 3-story garden walk-up type of product. It can also be broken down into smaller units, 12s, 24s, 18s. Again, there's the ability to modulate that and again use it in a very site-specific manner that's appropriate to each neighborhood on the site. Townhomes offer a tremendous amount of flexibility in terms of how it can be used on site. Here's a few examples from a mix of locations. They can be 2 or 3-story. They can have varying sizes and lengths. The ones you see here range from 2 and 3-story duplex type of products to like a 6-plex 2-story product to 5 and 6-plex 3-story product. That can be broken down in, with innovative architecture. You can start to break the massing down. This is an 8-unit building, but it breaks down into or effectively three sort of volumes. So as you have a streetscape, it doesn't feel like a big gunboat of a building. It starts to mimic a single-family neighborhood in many ways. We also have other ways of organizing townhomes. We can organize them on courtyards. We can organize them on motor courts. Again, a lot of variety. We can have the front doors facing the street, facing the opposite side of the building. There's a lot of room for interpretation with townhomes and flexibility. And then finally, cottages. Cottages are predominantly one-story architecture. They can, as you can see here, you can do it in a variety of styles. We're primarily thinking of them in terms of duplexes, but they can be singles as well. Important features on cottages tend to be front porches and front doors, good streetscape architecture, indoor-outdoor living. So you start to have private yards, which can be relatively small but still live well if you integrate that with the architecture properly. And then, we also have the ability to start to put these into motor court clusters. This image shows 6 units that are a mix of duplex, single. Some of these ones in particular have top volumes, but they have great street character. They have private yards that are small but work well with the architecture, and you can have a variety of styles, and it lives really well. People they love living in these spaces. This, since it's mostly one story, that tends to work well for a senior renter. Someone's in sort of a move down. I don't want to take care of the yard anymore, type of thing. I'm not even 50, and I'm already looking forward to the day when I don't have to deal with the yard. So, yeah. So those are the master plan and some architectural, I wouldn't say concepts, but ideas that are being explored by the team. Yeah. Any questions?
I have a question for you.
Yes.
The video showed nice overview of the current setup there. They show all the trees there. If you're planting out all the trees in that area, or can we plant? Because having all the trees coming out that get rid of across Wayne would be very dramatic, obviously.
Sure. I think the idea is that we're going to try to preserve as many of the trees as there's a couple of basin spaces where we're trying to keep a lot of trees, and then within the various pedestrian corridors and the perimeter of the site, my understanding we're going to try to keep as much of the tree volume as is feasible. There certainly will have to be some mass grading to get it to work, but in general, the master plan tends to be very cognizant of the terrain and is not trying to completely just scrape the thing and make a big flat pad out of it. It's really trying to use the landform, and our product selections in different neighborhoods reflect that, because someplace where you have a fairly steep grade take-up, is not going to lend itself as well for flats as it is for maybe townhomes. So we try to use the, having 4 different broad product types in our toolkit gives us a lot of flexibility as we approach each neighborhood and make it work.
I actually have a lot of questions. I don't think we're going to be able to attend to in all of this meeting, but I do understand you're the architect here. Who would be handling the master plan as far as the ingress? On the master plan, I saw when you brought the full one up, I saw 2 that said entrances. I thought I saw a third one up there in the unplanned part of it. But Yeah, again, my concern is the potential traffic that is coming along. I don't know, do we have any future plans, Jason or Ryan, or about broadening out 214 South Prairie to help with the added traffic development?
Yeah, so I'm taking my mask off so everybody can hear it. I've been trying to keep the thought. So yes, there is a plan to widen a portion of 214. However, a portion of 214 to South Prairie are all located in the county, along with the intersection of South Prairie and 214. So exactly how that road section gets dealt with is going to have to be kind of a discussion with the county because we don't control that. But our section is proposed to be widened to the 5 lane. One thing that this master plan doesn't show that's in the current development agreement is there's a required connection 210, which is that road that runs between kind of McDonald's, Fred Meyer, and goes out directly to Fort Tim, and there's a traffic light there. So that would be a fourth kind of entrance that's required under the development.
Okay.
With Pat piggybacking on that, looks like would this be like a right in, right out type deal? Would you put in an intersection?
So the traffic impact analysis completed envisions, some form of signalized intersection at the 104th Street entrance, and then 102nd Street entrance on the northern side would be right in, right out, and the access on South Prairie would be full access. And based upon the analysis that our traffic engineer has completed, it does meet all of the thresholds. What we're proposing, what we've identified within that traffic impact analysis, more units that we are, or has a greater impact than what we are actually proposing today, still meets all of the local thresholds that the city.
All right, thank you.
Oh, okay.
I'm just trying to get through, first of all, the architecture is so beautiful. It really is between trying to just put, units in versus actually making it look beautiful. We do appreciate that. We do see that. I think I echo the sentiments that are being said here from my fellow council members in regards to the concerns. And I think my question then is, and I guess it's similar to what Councilmember Swanton was saying, is, you have a development agreement already, and I guess the question is, what would be the high number for that? And is the purpose of this meeting to just inform us and then include us in decisions as far as design is concerned, or is it something else? Is it asking for more? Because this was brought on after the proposal of kind of the population presentation that we looked at. And so I'm trying to get down to like, what is truly the purpose of the presentation? Is it merely informational, or are we going to be looking to say yes to something later? I guess is what I'm asking. I'm trying to figure out the main purpose.
Yeah, understood, and thank you for the question. I think, again, we have a lot of work where this is a conceptual plan, and because again, there's a project that is within the city of Bonney Lake, it has an impact on the community, and we want to share what we've up to and within for your purpose as council members. We will be dealing with staff on a number of the entitlements, I think, as it relates to everything surrounding the development agreement. Again, we have some ongoing conversations to have with staff regarding steps surrounding that development agreement and moving forward on various components of the project. We are the underlying zoning, I guess, just the state does allow what we are proposing. So we're coming here to council. It really, again, we want to be a partner with you. We feel that it's best to do that and to be a central member of that partnership, and so we look forward to it.
Well, I appreciate it.
So if the agreement allows you to build what you're going to build, then this issue is expiring. And then I thought you said, you're saying two different things, right? You're saying the underlying zoning that exists, regardless of the agreement, we'll let you do what you want.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is that the zoning that exists today, regardless of the development agreement, will let you go. So again, like Councilman Baldwin was talking about,
Well, the purpose of this presentation here is as an informational thing, but again, we know that they're going to be in front of staff in particular for a number of different items moving forward, and also because of the project in the community, we thought it would be worthwhile to bring our presentation today to show you what we frankly have been working on as a great benefit.
you know, because basically we've been told that you can't economically get unless you change the
I can't speak to that.
So who can?
We, yeah. Can you elaborate on?
Sure, as my understanding, you know, correct me because you know the details, of course. I think the development agreement expires in what? So again, you know, we've been told, and I've been told specifically that your project doesn't work economically. You know, this is America, and you have to make money. You can't just spend money and have a return, right? So you have to build something that economically works. And I've been told that you cannot do this without a change to the agreement.
I believe that as it relates to the agreement, you know, there's a benefit to having certainty for both the city and us involved in terms of the long-term development.
And it makes perfect sense to me, right? That makes 100% sense. So it's kind of like, what is the new agreement? Let's see it. Let's like look at that.
Looking forward to having course. We didn't necessarily believe that. You know, again, the presentation tonight is showing off the project was necessarily the venue to discuss some of the agreement and something.
Would you be willing to come back after speaking with staff? Would you be willing to come back to another workshop so that we can actually ask those questions?
Yes.
Okay. About how long in the future do you think that would take?
I will have to confer with our team to that's time frame.
And you can communicate that to staff so we can afford it. All right. Well, you have, I have to say, I mean, I had a lot of questions. I had a lot more questions, but you have answered a whole lot of questions. Thank you for coming.
And I thought maybe it would be helpful just there's a few more slides that we have to get through, but I think, you know, again, because we can talk about time frame. So one is, again, just to kind of to wrap it up, you know, economically, this project, you know, will bring over $70 million in tax through sales taxes, new property tax revenue, sales tax construction. Huge benefit to the city. Also, I think as a tie on to that, you know, it's not just the numbers; it's also the community connection. So that's, you know, new residents visiting Lamppost Coffee or CJ's Deli or Mr. Jalapeno or even Safeway or Fred Meyer. You know, it's really integrating themselves into the community and being a part of that. And I think just as a personal anecdote here, and we talk about housing choice, and I think, you know, Kimberly's presentation especially also, you know, referenced kind of the ability to have a feeder population. I mean, I was at a separate presentation where said in Puget Sound region, it'll take 13 years for somebody saving doing the standard savings in order to afford an average home price. I mean, I know that, I just purchased a home 2 years ago, and I couldn't have told you that, couldn't have ever envisioned that that price was going to be the price I was going to pay for buying a starter home. So it's something that, we have a housing, crunch, multiple regions do, but, this is the project here in providing multiple different housing options and the release valve to allow people who are in larger homes to downsize or vice versa, really, serves the people who are in the community, stay in the community and participate.
Well, two last questions.
Yes.
One of them, I understand that you did develop a station.
That is correct.
Did you have anything to do with the residences that were around the Kent Station, or was it only the businesses within it?
We developed the Kent Station as well as the developer.
And did you have anything to do with the roundabout that's now going right there past Ford that gets you Willis? Right in there. Did you have anything to do with that roundabout that's there? Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think that's it. We'll just leave it with this slide, but we look forward to continuing the conversation. And
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
All right. So now going on to council open discussion. But I have an issue. Okay, Councilmember Evans.
I have an issue. I just wanted to make an announcement that tomorrow is the Pierce County, or Thursday is the Pierce County Regional Council annual shareholder meeting. It's the one where we go and our work plan. If you want information, I can forward that email. It is virtual here.
I would like to. Okay. Councilmember Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Real quick though, on February 3rd, myself, Councilperson Thornton, and Chief attended the community family meeting, and update on the point in time count by Walmart and Bonney Food Bank. They discussed utility shop notices. We had an excellent presentation with Stephanie and announced their name last week. And how a few shops we had buying like a very impressed how that staff up there took care of it ahead of time, what they could do to make sure everyone in our city loses any water. Great job.
Oh, very good.
And as well, the meeting.
Okay, do we have anybody else? Any further comment? Councilmember Baldwin?
Yes, I met with Chief Peter, and we talked about a lot of different things. The main question was, what are some of the things that are plaguing our community? And obviously, after just kind of sifting through everything we found, and I knew this already because of my husband is in law enforcement, but everything that's happening in our community has a lot to do with high level things. Things that are above just the city, as far as legislation and things like that. And so, I've been just kind of trying to figure out what can be done just on the city level for us to be able to do something about what is happening from the powers that be. So my question then is, and again, this doesn't have to be a full discussion, it's just something I am suggesting and a thought that I have, but in some cities, such as Puyallup, they have a lobbyist. And, my desire would be for the council to be the one that would select a lobbyist, and for us to vote on that because, we are representing the people. And so I would want, I don't know, I just think that the conversation I would like to have, I just think there are so many large issues that are floating above us that we can't grasp some of the problems in our community because we can't really do anything about it. And our hands are tied, which is really unfortunate to me. Obviously we live here. Right? We don't like what's happening as far as crimes and things like that. So there are just some things that we discussed, that we were just looking at, and it's all love. The other, I'm sorry, I have something else. And what's going on in Midtown. not what we were just talking about, but, what's going to get into it. And I have been looking at just the plans that Maple Valley had done with their ball fields, kind of looked at their design and what they had done. Because it's an area where a lot of people go, it's a hub that a lot of people go to. And so I wanted to maybe discuss that further, maybe in another meeting. But also in regards to the Alley Trail, I went there recently, and I'm thankful that Todd was able to do something about that area. Because, an interesting area. And so, I went out there and walked out there, and I just love what has been done as far as, I think it was public works, right, that cleared some of the forest action going on in there. But, it still feels a little dangerous. I was out there with my little one, and, there's some carts that we saw out there. There was some lean-to, some garbage and things like that. And my thought is to consider in the future that area is maybe having a spray park in the middle of the Alley Trail, where maybe instead of it being marked, it would be something permanent, and maybe getting together with some community organizations, like the Rotary, like Kiwanis, Lions Club, because, down at Pioneer Park, it's gorgeous down there. It's so gorgeous, and families go there all the time. And so I guess I just don't want us to only think about just the area that we are thinking about, but also include the Alley Trail and improving that even further with what Todd has already started. So those are just kind of some thoughts. I've been talking with a couple of people, and just, I wanted us to be just, look into that further, I guess, as a discussion.
When you say spray park, are you referring to where the water comes up?
Yeah, because, we don't have to hire somebody to be there to watch safety. You use at your own risk, and you can't turn on at night. So.
Okay, well, thank you, Councilmember Baldwin. Didn't want to leave Councilmember McClimans or Councilmember Fullerton out. I know are in attendance up there. Did you have any points of discussion tonight? Okay. Any further? All right. I believe we are now, we are at the end of open discussion. Now we have a review of council minutes.
We found 3 or 4 corrections, they're minor.
Okay. Councilmember Fullerton. Deputy Mayor Carter?
I got a couple of,
okay, is this something I can just announce all the way through? Okay, I will learn. All right, review of council. We have no action items. Item E, Madam Clerk.
This is item E, which is for discussion only, utility rate structure.
Okay, with Chris Gonzalez. Ms. Ryerson, are you taking the lead, or is Mr. Gonzalez taking the lead?
I have Chris here tonight to take the lead on this, and so I'll let him start the discussion. The discussion tonight is about the structure of the utility rates. We'll be coming to you in the near future with FCS's proposal, the company which Chris works for the utility rate study update. But he kind of needs to get a feel for how you want the structure to look. I've heard a lot of discussion about the change. So, Chris?
Sure. So, good evening, Council, and thank you for having me. Just to give you a very brief overview of the proposal that I initially provided to Sherry, it is a comprehensive rate and SDC, or system development charge study, for the city's water, sewer, and stormwater utilities. And so the rate study process, it involves looking at financial plans, revenue requirements, and how much revenue each utility has to generate to cover its costs. The cost of service analysis then gets into how do you recover that from single-family residential versus commercial versus multifamily and all the various customer groups that the city serves. And then the rate structure analysis involves developing a series of fixed and variable charges to recover the amount allocated to each customer class. And I will say for the cost of service and the rate structure analyses, we need detailed billing data from the city in order to be able to estimate how many customers the city is going to bill and how much water they use and so forth. And so I have been talking to Sherry and working with her and her staff to get an estimate from your billing software provider to develop a custom report to provide those statistics. And so having said that, our ability to do those parts of the analysis will be contingent on us being able to receive that information. So focusing on the rate design portion of the study specifically, I have a list of some things that Sherry had laid out as things that have come up during your previous meetings. And so the first item I see is adding a lifeline rate or being a low income or senior disabled type of rate. We can absolutely do that. I think the policy question that really comes up is, how do you determine and verify eligibility? And I find that utilities that have it in place will more often use some other metric. It's a property tax exemption or eligibility for school, reduced price school lunches and things like that. Because otherwise, you have to have your own program to verify the information, and it's just not practical in many cases. So that being said, knowing who would qualify or how many customers, we can easily develop a rate once we know who would be in that class. Another item I have, and if anyone has any questions or comments on these as I bring them up, please feel free to speak up. The next item I have is eliminating volume-based sewer rates. And I'm assuming that is primarily for residential users as opposed to commercial users. I feel like residential users, there's a mix from what we see with various municipalities in the area and in the industry. There's a mixture for single family. You have a number that have a flat rate per equivalent unit. For single family, that would generally be one. So there'd be a flat rate for single family, and then commercial, there'd be a fixed plus volume, based approach. And then for multifamily, it could be that. Either it could be a flat rate per dwelling unit, or it could be fixed versus, fixed and volume based. It depends on what the objective is. I will say that if rate affordability for low income users, particularly those that use a low amount of water, moving everybody to the same flat rate would be counterproductive to that if the goal is to improve affordability. However, there is a variation on the flat rate. I would call it a tiered flat rate. And so with that, so if you use like say 3 or less per month, pay one rate.
Sorry, Mr. Gonzalez, you're going in and out. I missed, if you could back up a couple of sentences, I missed what type of distinction this flat rate is.
Yeah, so the distinctions of by customer class, the rate options. Okay, so yeah, so I would say for single family, if it's not volume based, being sort of driven by winter average water consumption, there's a flat rate per single family home. For multifamily, you have a flat rate per dwelling unit, and often it is some fraction of the single family rate, maybe 60% of the single family rate per dwelling unit, or something like that. And then the other alternative is to treat them more like commercial or non-residential and have a fixed charge and then plus volume for water consumption. And so there are different things that you can do there. What I was also saying was that, particularly for single family, if you move everybody to a flat rate, that would tend to contradict if improving affordability is a goal. Putting everybody at the same rate, regardless of water use, tends to penalize low water users. And so what I was saying was there is a tiered alternative where if we define a threshold, say 300 cubic feet of usage per month, and I just pulled that number out. And if you're a single family home and you use less than that, you pay a lower rate than everybody else. And if you cross that threshold, then you pay a flat rate. And so that is a way that you can get around that to some extent. But something based on volume is going to be the most fair, from a rate equity perspective.
Thank you. We do have some questions. Councilmember Evans.
Thank you so much, sir. We're just kind of talking individually. I asked Sherry to pull some numbers. She had, on average, the average water user in Bonney Lake residential is 15 cc per every other month. So 7.5 basically. Our base rate is 10. So what you're getting is 10. So half or below that, half or above that. I'd like to possibly see that base rate move up to 12. Have a tier at 12.01 to 20, and then a third at 20 plus, and get rid of the summer altogether. I'd like to drop the sewer cap to 8 CFS per month, CCFs. That goes from 10 to 8. That saves some almost $11 on their sewer bill. Up the water rates on the commercial to offset for the decrease in the residential. And then not only do we have a rate for seniors currently, but make it to where it works for ag rentals as well, always the case, and base that on the Pierce County eligibility.
Okay, I was.
Steve, I heard some talking.
I didn't want to interrupt Chris. He had a point there. And it was delayed.
Mr. Gonzalez, did you have a response to that?
I'm sorry. What I was saying is I was trying to hear and it was kind of cutting out. So let's see. So we talked about. You were saying you wanted to see a reduction in the sewer. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think these are just my thoughts and what I'd like to keep considered. Reduction in the sewer cap from 10 to 8. Getting rid of the summer and winter tiers. And right now we have a 4-tier system, 0 to 10, 11 to 20, 21 to 30, and 31 plus. I'd like to see that to a 3-tier, 0 to 12, 13 to 20, or 22 somewhere in there, and then 22 and above on that. And those 3 tiers, or the 4 tiers, 3 of them only apply in summer, 2 of them only apply in summer. So getting rid of those altogether may solve a lot of things. Up the rate for commercial water users, that will help offset some of the costs from the residential rates. And then look at using Pierce County's metrics and eligibility requirements for seniors and include rentals for seniors. Right now, I believe a lot of it is just homeowners, and those in rental may not qualify. So I just want to make sure, and that's a legislative thing on our end we need to look at and consider. Those are my thoughts on that. Maybe logging us. We can just do that on our own.
Okay, I got a better one.
So Chris, you referenced our data set, of course, being very interested in that also. I think that might be able to help us out. Because I was thinking, that you do need the data set to work with to know what happens if you institute some of these um, changes. And I suspect, I don't know, Chuck, that the data file that goes to our building place is either a CSV or an XML file, right? So easy enough that you can get these guys a lot of data.
Yes, that's true. It's a flat text file that we send to them. But what they're looking for is an expanded data group. So what we're doing is basically we're writing a custom personal report that will pull it across an aggregate instead of just saying, hey, here's a data dump for every single month times 3 different county, residential, and commercials. We're creating a specific export just for this that gives them the information that they're specifically looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, as long as they get, more information, or whatever information you require. Right?
Yes.
So because from Chris' perspective there, a question for you guys over there, it would be really nice and interesting to know, and maybe not other councils or it is politics, of course, because I know the mayor ran on, I ran on, it's an important subject. As far as I'm concerned, I'm here to do the job that adjust rates. But the mayor can support the work we must have a little bit in others. But at any rate, the what ifs is what I'm working for because we have items like the American Recovery Fund. We have millions of federal dollars that were available possibly to spend on, sewer projects, water projects. But very interested, of course, of what happens if we say, okay, we're going to spend $2 million of this in water. Does that make sense? Does that affect the rate? Or, you should spend that in sewer? Those kind of questions, hopefully, we'll be able to work with or not. That's something in your model, right? Questions also in my mind about other scenarios for things like the excise tax, which isn't directly on the consumer, but it's an enterprise tax on the utility that has some effect on, how that works out. So, if we right now, we have the, I think, 12% or what have you tax on the system. So, I'm just interested in kind of, hopefully, we'll get to a point where, and that's why I was kind of asking the mayor about a smaller working group when we get to that area of, running through a bunch of different scenarios of the what ifs kind of thing. That is terribly annoying to try to figure out, we go to a black day on this, what does it do? Who ends up paying for it, those kind of things. How interactive in the end we'll be able to deal with that.
Ms. Ryerson, did you have a comment on that? I saw you were reading.
I think Mr. Gonzalez's proposal has 3 different rate structures. Is that right, Chris?
Yeah. And it's just to set up, it's not that we're unwilling to do more, but it's really just kind of setting an assumption, base assumption for the level of effort, basically.
And Councilmember Swatman, we will be bringing forward the ARPA discussion on I believe it's March 1st meeting. So some of that will be decided, hopefully, in the immediate future. For the sake of us on this side of, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I know, but in reference to the rate model and stuff, right? Hopefully we're doing it in a very a way that we can fully understand, against the rate model or, what our actions are. Because it could be great ideas to go spend $2 million again in the water projects, but it may only have a 2% effect on water rates when if you would have applied it over on the sewer side, it would have a 10% effect on sewer.
So we actually don't have a agreement with FCS yet. So they haven't even started their work. It'll take them a few months, would be my guess. Chris, what's your timeline on this?
I guess I was going to ask what the timeline needed to be, but typically we would say that, a study of this type would take somewhere in the realm of 4 to 6 months to get the
Yeah.
results. And of course,
So you're
that's
possibly considering, Swatman, you're possibly considering not spending your ARPA money until we get to a point where he can give you scenarios, which sounds like it could be 4 to 6 months, possibly longer if we are not able to get the information from Eden in a timely fashion. I know that Steph has been working with Eden for the last 2 months trying to get the information from them. So.
Right, yeah, and it is as you know, it's an ultra complicated, lot of variables and issues. I just hope that we do the best effort to look at many of them as possible so that we can really inform the good decisions forward on this. Because again, I think it's really responsible to try to figure out if there's a 400% increase in water rates possible for, people out there in the summer, the 4 tiers rate thing, that's what Councilmember Evans was referring to. It's just that there can be that, and questions about, because it gets really technical, right, Chris, because, you didn't say anything about marginal cost of service, which I don't imagine, I've never heard any of you folks look at that. Kind of an interesting concept, but maybe it's too, techy for even a rate analysis. Right? That's that issue where obviously it costs X to deliver 10 gallons, but it doesn't cost 2X to deliver 20 gallons to use it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because a lot of the costs are fixed. So yeah, you can, there'd be additional variable costs to provide, twice as much water, but the fixed cost wouldn't scale up the same way.
And I don't know, it's more from council's perspective of some of the issues that would drive costs are obviously expenses, right? So, and that's where it gets pretty sticky because what the cost basis you guys use for the models, right? That could be up for discussion, frankly, right? My goal in the end is to have water rates and sewer rates that match. I was told earlier today, so there are sewer rates are twice that they are of some. So, and Councilor Orchard said no, and I had another councilor saying yes. So those kind of issues, it shouldn't be a conversation. I don't want people sitting in Kent at a bar thinking that you're looking at the highest water rates in the region. That shouldn't be a conversation.
I don't care what people can't, I care what people want.
But they live that because they've been told.
Mayor,
Ms. Ryerson, yes.
can I have you remind the council to speak into the microphone? We're having a real hard time hearing on this side, and so we can't have a real good dialogue if you're not speaking in, or if you're talking over one another, it makes it really hard on this side for us.
Thank you, Ms. Ryerson. Did everybody hear that? Please. Yes, there we go. And Mr. Gonzalez. Plot, and I think a more realistic time frame. Months is that correct? 6 to 8 months. Really?
It's a government employee, why can't we get this done in 60? My quick statement would be, I'm probably with what Councilmember Swatman would agree is on the ARPA or the Grants Act. I'm okay holding off on that if we're spending it properly. I'm not all about spending it fast, I'm about spending it correctly.
Absolutely. Councilmember Fulton, it was nice seeing you. Did you have a question? Oh, there we go. Can you hear us?
Okay, I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
Can now, yes.
And I have been it's been kind of cut and in and out. So I'm not sure if somebody already asked this question or not. So please forgive me if I'm re-asking something. But it's my understanding that there's actually a flat rate that if you go out of town and you are not using your water for like a whole month or something, then you still have to pay a flat rate fee of $120 a month. That seems a little bit over the top to me. So I was wondering if there is a way that we can put that on vacation or put a stop on it. I know I've spoken with Steph about this before. So I don't know if that's something that's possible. So if people are traveling or snowbirds going out of town, can they put it on vacation or on a stop?
I mean, I would say there are definitely utilities that have that kind of a policy where they would say, okay, 50% of the base rate is what you pay if you're, out of town or whatever. There's just a burden to track that, and then in some cases, they might actually still be using water if they're around for part of the time, and then the reality is that the costs don't necessarily go down very much. Kind of like I was mentioning before, I mean, most of the costs are fixed, so to the extent that you don't recover them from those customers, you have to recover them from the other customers, and so it just creates an additional burden for the ones that are staying year round. Having said that, there are utilities that do it, and you can do it. It's just something to be aware of.
Do we have any further discussion on that? Okay, hearing none, I believe we have no more business. I will call for a motion. Okay, all say yay.
Yay.
We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Chris.
Good night.